Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bible Q&A. Today we're discussing, can you have your prayers answered 100% of the time? Well, yes, but not the way you think. It's true that Matthew chapter 21 verse 22 gives the impression that if you ask God for anything, he will give it to you. And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive. However, 1 John chapter 5 verses 14 to 15 show us what he really meant. And this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he heareth us. And if we know that he hear us, whatsoever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we desired of him. 1 John chapter 5 verses 14 to 15. You only get what you want if what you pray for is in line with God's will. This means, for example, that you have to obey God to have your prayers answered. As it was said in Proverbs, he that turneth away his ear from hearing the law, even his prayer shall be abomination. Proverbs chapter 28 verse 9. Also, if you want something, God has to also want it. That's what God's will means. The problem is, God isn't as interested in our stuff as we are. For example, some people want money, but God doesn't really care about money if it isn't connected to him. The psalmist said, "For thou desirest not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offering." Psalms chapter 51 verse 16. Animals were money to the Israelites, and yet God didn't actually care too much about the animals he was receiving. He cared more about the worship of their owners, according to Hosea chapter 6 verse 6. Other people long for power, but God doesn't even want people to seek to be powerful. As it was said in Matthew, "But it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister." Matthew chapter 20 verse 26. Lust for power can lead to greed and all kinds of nasty things, as shown by the stories of Saul and the Pharisees. The list goes on and on. God owns everything, so he doesn't want anything. As it was said in Job, "Who hath prevented me, that I should repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine." Job chapter 41 verse 11. Thus, there aren't many things actually covered by his will, and thus there aren't many things people can actually pray for and expect immediate results. You know the one prayer you are certain to get answered? "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven." Matthew chapter 6 verses 9 to 10. That's it. That's the only thing you can pray for with certainty, for what God wants to happen to come to pass. You don't have to say this prayer word for word, but you can't ask for anything that is unrelated to it, because it's the only thing God can't have without just turning us into robots. Anything else is just stuff God doesn't actually care about or stuff God already has. For example, God basically had to answer Elijah's prayer in 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 38. Imagine if Elijah's sacrifice didn't light up after Elijah mocked the prophets of Baal and poured water on his own offering. God would look as powerless as Baal, unable to fulfill his own will, and nobody would believe in him. God wanted the exact opposite, so he burned the sacrifice and even the wood below it. That's also why Jesus could say that God answered his prayers before he even made them. As it was said in John, "And Jesus lifted up his eyes, and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me." John chapter 11 verses 41 to 42. All the stuff he asked for was stuff God planned on doing anyway. It's no surprise that the one exception, in Luke chapter 23 verse 34, was denied because it would violate biblical prophecy. Of course, a prayer can't just fulfill God's general will. It also has to fulfill God's specific will for a particular individual. For example, Paul wished to be healthier in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 8, and God said no. Why? Wouldn't God want Paul to be healthier so he could make more missionary journeys? Well, it's because God didn't actually need Paul to make those extra trips, according to verse 9. Paul had already gotten enough grace from him. Apparently, whatever Paul was doing was good enough, and what God actually wanted from him was humility, according to verse 7. Thus, since God didn't need that extra strength from Paul, it wasn't a part of his specific will for Paul, and since it wasn't a part of his specific will for Paul, then it was an ineligible prayer. Thus, it didn't need to be answered. We're back to 100%. What God wanted from Paul, he did get. Now, it's not like God will just refuse to answer any request that has nothing to do with him. Jabez asked for more land in 1 Chronicles chapter 4 verse 10, and God gave it to him. What does having more land have to do with his purpose? We should also remember that it may seem like God hasn't answered our prayer, but that's just because he's taking his time. After all, Abraham was 100 years old when Sarah gave birth to Isaac, according to Genesis chapter 21, verse 5. However, the example of Paul shows that the effectiveness of requests that aren't related to his will is only, 90%. He's just doing something nice for you as a reward for your service. He's not required to answer it like he would if you made a true prayer. And sometimes you might not get your wish fulfilled as a result. Thus, some churches may portray God as a genie, but even though you get unlimited wishes, you can't just wish for whatever you want and expect your dreams to come true. You're going to need a lamp for that. So there you have it. Can you have your prayers answered 100% of the time? Yes, because God answers prayers that are in line with his general will and his specific will for you, and those are the only prayers that count. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.